Subject General English Lesson 4. The image. Answer the following question. Makai wahangsi pakhompiu hare. Give reason why the sculptor was working so hard. The sculptor akogi nung gi muti sabna so hard asuki kan kana working thabuk churami no haibigi maram give reason maram piu hare ko. The sculptor was working so hard because the temple at Belur was nearly ready. The sculptor nungi muti saba hakpa duna was working so hard askimatik thabak kana surami because maramdi the temple at Belur delaiba the temple laisang adu was nearly ready. Lusindagi torami habko. The temple was to be consecrated and open for worship within a short period. The temple haibala sangdu within a short period atena matang manungda for worship like criminal open hangdokpa and was to be consecrated maduda puja tobutarmi. Therefore, he was compelled to finish his stone image within the stipulated time. Therefore, Maramaduna, he, Mahangna, within the stipulated time. Within the stipulated time, akang matamdugi manungda, his stone image, magi nungi mutiedu, was compelled to finish. Listen batarmi. How do you know that Jakanachari was fully absorbed in his work? Jakanachari na in his work magi thabak subududa fully adukimatik absorbed masi thoi hakchang yomi habsi. How do you know? Nang kamaiton khangbage. We know that Jakanachari was fully absorbed in his work because whilst working on the main image of the temple, he spoke to no one and tolerated no intervention. When noon came, we know that Jakanachari she was fully absorbed in his work. In his work, magi thabak to the fully absorbed adukimatik thai hakchang yauna torami habise. Because Manandi, while working on the main image of the temple like Sangadugi on the main image. Moriba Mutiedu, while working same tamda, he spoke to no one. He hana no one karagumtada spoke wangde and abasung tolerates no interruption. Aduga no interruption moda upon the P the mana ya Jeremy. Haidi upon Jeremy. Even when noon came, he did not stop for food. Even when noon came, pung baro tarapawa, he didn't stop for food. He hana for food. Chakcha nabidamukta did not stop lepam de. Chakcha gena jut matom deba. When remain of his remaining hero. Of his meal, he requested not to disturb him. When remains of his meal, mana chakchai lain matamdasu he requested not to disturb him. Not to disturb him moda upon pektanaba he requested man haijaremi. He was so absorbed in his work that he could not see the king who had approached him silently. He was so absorbed in his work. He mase in his work magi thauda thabaktuda was so absorbed atukimatik pun lupsalami that madudi the king who had approached him silently. The king ningthꯧduna him magi marakta silently tuminna had approached changkhibadu he mahana could not see uba ngamlamde. Why was the old sculptor annoyed when he saw someone standing at the doorway watching the image? At the doorway, Thongjinpanda watching the image, Mutidu yengdana leiba someone kanaguma standing left and lebedu when he saw mana unamatamda. Why was the old sculpture kogi nungi muti saba hal adu karimramgi annoy sauramnibino habko? The old sculptor was annoyed when he saw someone standing at the doorway watching the image because no one was allowed to see the image before it was completed. The old sculptor Nungi Muti Saba Ahal Adu was annoyed, Sormi, when he saw someone standing at the doorway watching the image. Watching the image, Mutidu watching Yenga at the doorway, Thongbanda standing lepiba someone kanagumba amadu when he saw man urmba matamda. Because Maramdi before it was completed, Masi Pungpana Lodi Pogwa, no one kanagumta was allowed to see the image. The image Hai Muti si no one kanagumta was allowed to see. Yengba Yahlamde. The stranger present disturbed him while he was fully absorbed in his work. The stranger present Sakangdabaduna presents Lakpadu Lakudun Sakangdaba Lakuduna disturbed him Maunda upon Pirami while he was fully absorbed in his work. While he mana in his work magi tabuk to the fully absorbed. Yamna puning changna toimatamda. At that time, he was so busy that he did not have time to have his meal. At that time, he was so busy, he mase was so busy, adukimatik mathau chilami that madudi he mahana to have his meal, magi sak sabagi did not have time, matam phangamde. How did stranger compliment the work of the old sculptor? How did the stranger sakangdabduna the work of the old sculptor ahal oriba nungi muti sabadugi the work thabadu? How did matokramna compliment thagalambagi? How did the old sculpture react? How matokramna the old sculpture koigi ahal oriba nungi muti sabaduna kari phongdorkhirmi? The stranger complimented the work of the old sculpture very highly. The stranger sakangdabaduna the work of the old sculpture ahal oraba nungi muti sabagi work thabak tawbadu very highly adukimatik wangna complimented thagatlami. He said that he had gone round and see everything. He said that man harmi he had gone round loin koirure and seen everything kudima sin yenge. He remarked that the pillar were divine, the figure on the wall were the work of a godly hand. He remarked that Manapalami, the pillar Yubimakong asi were divine, the figure on the wall. Palang duga hek yanamatamda isorgi sakpangum warami. The wall were the work of a godly hand. The wall had walls palang singadusu were the work of a godly hand. A godly hand isorgi mahurki oiba work thabak warami. He also said that the temple could be remembered by coming generation as the greatest one. He also said that man masisu harami the temple laisang ase as the greatest one, ꯈ꯭ꯋꯥꯏꯗꯒꯤ ꯑꯆꯧꯕ ꯑꯃ ꯑꯣꯏꯅ ꯃꯒꯨꯟ ꯂꯩꯕ ꯑꯃ ꯑꯣꯏꯅ by coming generation ꯂꯥꯛꯀꯗꯧꯔꯤꯕ ꯆꯥꯔꯣꯟ ꯁꯨꯔꯣꯟꯁꯤꯡꯅ would be remembered ꯅꯤꯡꯁꯤꯡꯍꯧꯔꯒꯗꯕꯅꯤ. Hearing this, on hearing this, the sculptor angrily said that he did not need the stranger or his certificate. On hearing this, masi taba matamda the sculptor nungi murti sabaduna angrily sauna said haglami that madudi he mahakna did not need the stranger sakangdami or natraga his certificate magi sabigi oiba certificate he did not need mark darkar oide. Why did the old sculptor wants the stranger to be dragged away? Why karmangi the old sculpture ahal orba nungi muti sabduna the stranger sakangda miedu want to be dragged away chingthokiba putokiba pamno. Why did he feel that the stranger what we are inauspicious? Why did he feel adugumana kari mapungni phawkhirami the stranger were sakangdabi wahai singadu we are inauspicious laibak thibani haina. The old sculptor wanted the stranger to be dragged away because after praising his work, the stranger pointed out a defect in the navels of the stone image. The old sculptor ahaloiba nungimuti sabaduna wanted the stranger sakangdabadu to be dragged away chingthokiba pamlami because maramdi after praising his work magi thabadu gi matangda after praising thagala matungda the stranger sakangdabaduna of the stone image nungi murti adugi in the navel khoidou mayada pointed out a defect asoiba ama leire hena taklami. On hearing this, the old sculptor became very angry. On hearing this masi taba matamda the old sculpture ahaloiba nungi muti sabadu became very angry yamna saurmi. He felt that the stranger word were inauspicious because they defined the sacred qualities of the image. He felt that mana mapungni khalami the stranger word sakangdabi wai singadu was inauspicious yam laibak thibani haina because one of they defined the sacred qualities of the image or the image muti adugi sacred quality asengba mogul adu defiled moina lana taure haina. What was the flaw in the image as pointed out by the stranger? By the stranger sakangdabduna as pointed out mana taliba in the image muti dugi manungda what was the flaw chanthare du kari ormi. The stranger pointed out that there was a wet space under the navels of the image. The stranger sakangdabduna pointed out talami that there was a wet space under the navels of the image or the image mutidugi under the navel khoidou makhada there was a wet space so lauba jaga ama yaure haina. There was a cavity filled with water and a toad was living in it. There was a cavity filled with water ising tungaba. There was a cavity ahoba hang mafam ama leire and aduga in its machine manungda a toad was living hangoi ama su leire hena mana talami. Therefore, even when the other parts of the image smeared with sandal paste become dry and stood out in whitish flag, A small area under the navel remains wet. Therefore, maramduna even when the other part image of the image mutiyadagi other part atopa sarusing adu smear with sandal paste akogi sandon taisan matamda become dry kangsilami and the stood out on whitish flag the ango mapak oina thomi a small area under the navel adi khoidong makhagi a small area jaga apikpa jaga amadi remain wet so tana lemi